friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today to talk more about investments, and this is going to specifically be about food preparation items. What are going to be the best things for you to invest in? Now, the brands and type you choose to get needs to be tailored to suit you, your needs, your future needs, and your pocketbook. So you may choose to invest more in one particular item and less in another. So I'm going to be talking about some specific items, what I have, what I use, and also throw out some ideas. Also explain why I chose to spend more on this particular item while spending less on this other item. So let's start off with the grain mill. Now, of all the food preparation items I have, that is the most expensive item I have. The second most expensive would be the canner. Now, the grain mill that I have is the Country Living grain mill. Another very popular brand that is less money, still not cheap, but less money, would be the Wonder Mill. Now, here's why I chose the Country Living grain mill over the Wonder Mill. And that is because the Country Living grain mill comes as a manual grain mill, but can be adapted to use with electricity. I also chose that because it is very solidly built and it has a very big, easy to handle manual wheel. And it's also made not just here in the United States, but in my own state, Washington State. So as we started down this road and started thinking about our future and thinking about what would happen if we didn't have electricity, even though we did at that time also start investing in our solar panels and our battery bank that we slowly over the years kept adding to and building upon, we also know that anything can happen and that can be gone, especially during the winter months. Even if that setup is always there for us, we get so little power collection in the long, dark winter months where we have nothing but rain, and more rain and constant cloud cover. And of course, the days are much shorter on top of that. So we needed to know that we had ways to do the important things we needed to do. That is why we chose that grain mill. After getting my YouTube channel going and then the Etsy store, and life got more and more busy all the time, it can take 15 minutes to an hour, depending on what type of grain you're grinding, to grind a single cup of flour. And so my time was getting more and more scarce, and I didn't have the time to constantly be grinding grains all day for making flour for our breads. So then Patrick had an old motor that he had found. I can't remember if it was a garage sale or what. He fixed it up and made it so that it would work with our Country Living grain mill. Because here's the other great thing about that grain mill is you can remove the handle, and because the wheel it's made to have a pulley attached to it, so you can attach that to an electric motor that we can run off solar if we need to, or gas generator, or you could even rig up a bicycle or treadmill or something to that so that you don't have to grind by hand. You can still be totally off grid and do things manually or with the power of your feet and legs. So that's what's great about that, is that you can adjust it to fit your lifestyle and what you need. However, if you're in a position, let's say you have solar power and it's pretty dependable because you live in a place that gets sun year round, and even on short days you get plenty of solar power, then maybe a Wonder Mill is going to be a better investment for you. Or it might be better for you to get the Wonder Mill plus the manual Wonder Mill, because there's two. There's an electric one and then there's the manual one. And that might be, I haven't looked at the prices recently, but you might be able to get both of those for the same price as it costs for the Country Living grain mill. So those are the two that I know most about. Now, I'm hoping that, and you can do this with any other item I'm talking about, that people that have experience in different types of grain mills, dehydrators, canners, and so on will put their own ideas down below and why they like or dislike any particular item that they have. Now let's move on to talking about dehydrators. I have only had one brand of dehydrators, but I have a total of 4. And the reason why that is, there's a couple of different local auctions that go on here every year. And I had been doing the auction by radio rather than being there in person, 'cause it's just too busy to show up to these things in person. So I was listening on the radio and then called in my bids, and there was a dehydrator that came up, and I thought, cool, it was brand new. And I didn't know what the brand was. I didn't know. I figured, well, if nothing else, at least I'm helping with a good cause. And I managed to get this brand new Nesco. Well, it's actually Open Country, I think is what it was called, but it's made by Nesco. It's the same dehydrator. And I got it for $30. It only had the 4 trays, but it had a whole bunch of other things that came with it, even though I never used those items. And I started using it immediately and loved it. And then found out I could buy more trays and add to it, and started using that more and more. I didn't even know anything about the Excalibur at that time, or even if it was made, because I've had that dehydrator. Guess what? I still have that very first dehydrator. The motor still runs great. And then years later, I was debating, I'd really want to have a backup dehydrator, or at least a second one. I debated for a while whether or not I wanted to invest in the much more expensive Excalibur or get the Nesco. And I chose to go with the Nesco because the trays work both ways. It didn't matter what machine I put the trays on, it still worked. I could have them running side by side, and I was already familiar with how to use it, so it just made the most sense, and it saved me money going that way. And then the other 2 dehydrators I got, Nesco Dehydrators, I happened to stumble across at garage sales. One I paid $5 for, the other one I paid $3 for. One of them appeared to have never been used at all, and the other one might have been used once or twice, but really no wear and tear that I could see on these, and they worked perfectly. And those are actually the ones I'm using most now. Now, the only thing about the first one that I got is eventually the bottom part of it broke, and so I had to throw that out, but I had 3 more dehydrators, and the motor on that one still runs. So I love the Nesco. It's proven to be, other than the plastic parts that do break over time, those are usually the cheaper parts to replace, but the motor's still good on all of them. I've had none of them go bad on me in that way. The downfall again comes back to the plastic trays and the fact that they do break and start to come apart in time, but I still keep using them, and a lot of you know I use the cloth covers on them. I don't use the little mesh covers anymore, so you can save even more money by avoiding buying the mesh covers and just make your own cloth covers, and I'll link to that video down below. But anyway, I've been using these Nesco dehydrators for years. I've been happy with them. Now, I also know people that have both the Excalibur and the Nesco style dehydrators, and like them both for different reasons. So again, this comes back to tailoring it to suit you. I know that you can also purchase stainless steel trays to go with it. You're going to be paying a lot more, but you do have the option, which is really good for those who are trying to get away from the plastic. But I personally don't have any experience with the Excalibur. Just weighing it out for me, I had to make that choice as to what I preferred in the way that it worked, in the way that I can stack up to 12 trays on each dehydrator, or have 1 or 2 or 4 or whatever it is I want. I'm not limited to a certain size, and that was one of the other reasons why I went that way. But I also know that the Excalibur, from what I've heard other people say, from what I've read other people say, is also very efficient. So what I do recommend, though, even if you go with neither one of those brands, what I recommend is that when you go shopping for a dehydrator, I think one of the most important things to look for, always make sure you're reading your reviews, but also check to see if it has a temperature gauge where you can adjust the temperature to suit whatever it is that you're dehydrating, because some don't come with any kind of temperature control. You just plug and go, and you might not even know what the temperature is, especially if you don't have the book anymore. And so it's nice to know what that is, because if you're dehydrating delicate herbs, you might want the temperature as low as 95 and to 105. And if you're dehydrating meats, you might want your setting at 135. And if you're dehydrating fruits and vegetables, you're going to want to set it somewhere between 115 and 125 degrees. This is important to have. However, even if you don't have a temperature control, let's say you already have a dehydrator, there's ways you can work around that. And I've talked about this in other videos, where you can put your heavier items, the items that need more heat, closer towards wherever your heat source and fan is. Like with the Nesco, it's at the top. I believe on the Excalibur, it comes from the back. Put those items that take longer to dry closer, and the more delicate items farther away from that heat source, and then just keep a close eye on it. And the more you use it, the more you'll get comfortable and just know about when things are going to be ready. Now let's talk about blenders. Now, you know, I went with the lesser expensive means for the dehydrator, and part of that was because of the deals that came up, and you know, getting the $3 and $5 one and the other one at the auction, which got me started. So when it comes to blenders, I opted for the same thing. I went with the lesser expensive ones. Now, before the Vitamix even came to be, I had been going through blenders like every 6 months. The very first blender I ever had was an Oster, and it lasted me for many years. And then when it died, all of a sudden, and it had been being used a lot, I decided to try some other brands. I tried some that were more expensive. I tried some that were about comparable price-wise to the Oster, and all of them broke. And even though the one I paid, I think $60 for, I think it was a Hamilton Beach at Costco, I thought it would be a really good one. 6 months, it broke down. And I decided I was going to go back to the Oster because it had already proven to me to be a good brand. And at the time, the one you see behind me on the counter, I paid $25 for that, brand new. And it's still the same one, and I actually don't even remember how many years old it is now. I know it's got to be about 15 years old, maybe. Because I was so happy with it, I thought, you know what? I spent $60 on a blender that broke down in 6 months, but I could go back and buy another $25 blender, pay less than I did for the one, and have a backup one. I still have that backup motor. I still don't need it. And you can buy backup parts for it, pictures and stuff. I do have different backup parts I have on hand ready to go, but this thing has been doing all I need it to do. I know people love the Vitamix, and people swear by it, and that's great. And some people have the Ninja. Please put your input on those down below so people can read through and decide for themselves if that's going to be something they want to invest in. My personal preference is the Oster. I could get 2 for far less than what it would cost me for one Vitamix, and this one is still hanging in there strong. No problems with it. And but I do understand that the Vitamix can do more things that your standard blender like this doesn't. I just haven't had any need for that, and am very pleased with it. So just weigh out what is important for you. And if you read the comments down below of those that I know will comment about their Vitamix and why it has been a good choice for them to spend that kind of money on that kind of blender, then you can decide from that. And that's why we should work as a community. It doesn't make me better than somebody else because I decided to spend more money on the Country Living grain mill any more than it makes the person that decided to spend more money on the Vitamix better, or vice versa. Because I chose to be more frugal doesn't make my choice better for somebody else who may need the options that the Vitamix has that my Oster does not. So again, it comes back to tailoring it to suit you. And everybody can say, oh, you should buy this or you should buy that because it's the best. Well, it might be the best for them. It might not be the best for you, or even the best for your pocketbook. So I can understand why people wouldn't want to invest in a Country Living grain mill, and it very likely may not be the best choice for them. Now, when it comes to canners, yes, I did invest in that. When I finally decided to get into pressure canning, I had the hot water bath canner and been doing that for years. I did a little research, I talked to friends, and everybody was telling me, and everything I could find was that the All-American canner was the best. And I decided, well, if I'm going to do this, I want something that's not only is it built here in the US, it's something I know will last me a lifetime and that I can even pass down to my children. And so it was worth it to me to purchase that. Plus, I could get the tall one that I got. I got the second to the largest one. I always forget what the size is. Is it the 30 quart? I don't know. think it is. One of the reasons I chose that was that I could do 2 layers of quart jars in there, 2 rows of quart jars. So I can up to 14 quart jars at a time, 16 wide mouth pint jars, and 18 regular mouth pint jars. That's why I went through that for that size. Now, if you are looking into the All-American canner, again, there is the even bigger size. You can do even more. I don't remember how many jars it holds, like quart jars, but you can stack them, but it's also much wider. The reason we chose not to get that one is because we always use the propane burner. Now, I did do last summer, I think I did a video just on that. It was part of the FAQ series that I'll go ahead and link to down below if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that in particular. But anyway, if I would have went with that big a size, it would not have fit on that particular burner. So, you know, you got to look into all these things. However, I know that there's plenty of people that have been canning for many years, and they use a Presto or other type of canner. And just again, look into, you know, what can your pocketbook handle, but also read those reviews, read the comments. Think of it longevity, and think of also replacement parts. One of the things that also sold me on the All-American canner was no need to replace the rubber gasket, because there's no rubber gasket. It doesn't need one. It does, though, have a little rubber plug that may need to be replaced at some point, but as of yet, I've never needed to replace mine. But that part is really cheap. I did buy some backup parts to have on hand, and it is a good idea to have a backup weight on hand in case you misplace your weight. I have 2, but I was blessed enough to happen to find one. I only paid 50 cents for it at a garage sale, and to buy one brand new, at least last time I looked, was like $20 to $25. And that also brings up a great point that I was going to add. Don't forget, just like with the dehydrators and the canning weight and the other 2 All-American canners that we bought a couple years ago, we paid $20 for 2 of them. They're different sizes. One's, I think, the smallest size, and the other one's the next size up. And the reason I bought them was not only was it a screaming deal, I was keeping an eye out for canners for my daughter-in-law. And so I did give the bigger one to my oldest son's wife, and now my youngest son is getting married, and so I might give her that other one if she ever decides to get into pressure canning. For now, it's just sitting in storage and ready to go. If nothing else, it might be something I've yet to use it, but if I ever just want to can a real small batch, that's going to be the better option, because then I'm not heating up this big, huge canner. So anyway, that's why I went ahead and bought them, and can't promise that you'll always find a deal that good, especially on All-American canner that still has the manual and the box and looks like it's never been used. That's gonna be really hard to find, but don't forget to look secondhand. And if you can't go out garage selling, check Facebook Market. If you don't have Facebook, this is one of the reasons why I still have our Facebook, even though I'm not on Facebook. One of the reasons my account stays open is because Patrick uses Facebook Market to find all kinds of great deals, especially more local. And that's what's nice about Facebook Market. You can find things in your own town, and then it spreads out from there. So usually when you're searching for something specific, the ones closest to you are going to show up at the top of the list. And then the farther out away from you are, that's, you know, farther down the list. So it's going to depend on how far you want to travel. You can look Craigslist too, and also eBay. So these are some other options to look into if you're trying to find them secondhand and you can't get out garage selling. And then the other food preparation item I wanted to talk about, I got a couple other smaller things I'll mention, and that is mixers. Now, a lot of people have a stand mixer such as the KitchenAid, which I've always admired the KitchenAid. I think it's beautiful, and every so often I kind of think about it, but then I stop myself and think, why do I want to pay $300 to $400 for something that's just going to be more of a counter ornament? Because I don't use stand mixers. In fact, the only thing I would ever use a stand mixer for is if I ever decided to make marshmallows again, because a regular handheld mixer, it takes a really long time of mixing the mixture for making homemade marshmallows. So that's the only place where I could see a stand mixer for me personally would be useful. And I haven't made marshmallows in years, and who knows when I'll ever do it again. So that's just not important to me. A lot of people, though, depend on their KitchenAid. That's how they make their bread and knead their bread. Where I'm more of a hands-on person, I'd rather get my hands in there. And then it comes back to, again, depending on a power source for mixing, and I rarely ever use an electric mixer at all. I do have one, a small one, that I use maybe once a year. The rest of the time, whenever I need to mix something, I just use this little Oxo Egg Beater. I use this for whipping cream, whipping eggs, whatever it is I need to whip, even making mashed potatoes. So unless I'm in a hurry and I really need to do it quickly, then I might pull out the electric mixer. But this doesn't require any power. I think I paid $20 for it. Again, this comes down to, what do you need it for? And again, people, please share down below if you have a KitchenAid, how you use it and why you use it. I know you can get all kinds of attachments to go with your KitchenAid so you can make much more use of it. I think there might even be like a pasta maker thing. But there's so many different things that you can get to attach to your KitchenAid to make more of it in that way. We all need some kind of mixer, whether it be something as simple as this to the $300 to $400 stand mixer. It's gonna again come back to whatever it is you need it for. Then a couple other smaller things I'm gonna mention, just because these are gonna be things that you may or may not need. When I learned about the stick blender, people have been talking about it for years, and I kept until I got into soap making. And then I decided I really needed the stick blender. And you can make soap without a stick blender, but I tell you what, the stick blender speeds up the process. So to me, it was worth it. I do think when it comes to stick blenders, if you're gonna get one, try to at least go with something in the moderate price range. Don't go with a cheap one, because they're going to be most likely to fall apart and not last. Now, I only use it for two things. Once in a while, I might try it for something else, but the two things I use it for is soap making and mayonnaise making, and that's it. So, but in both of those cases, having a stick blender is really a blessing. And I do recommend you check into getting one, because it will make the mayonnaise making process and the soap making process go much easier and smoother for you. But either one of these things can be done without that. You still have this. This would still work for making mayonnaise. Oh, and if you're interested in my homemade mayonnaise recipe, which I'm probably going to update because I got some ideas for trying some new things, and I can't remember if in that mayonnaise, that last one I did, if I did my new recipe, which is, when it comes to the fat, I do half of it melted coconut oil and the other half avocado oil. Personally, do not like olive oil in my mayonnaise. I like olive oil, don't like the way it makes the mayonnaise taste. So you can do that. I've tried it before, didn't care for it. But anyway, I'll link to that old video down below. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up was, if you're into vacuum sealing any of your dried goods, I do recommend, because it is so inexpensive, and I'll link to this particular one below, because I have two different brake bleeder pumps, and one I paid more for than what this is now. One of these two is my original brake bleeder pump that I bought like 5 years ago, and I've used the heck out of this thing, and it is a great one. The other one I bought as a backup, because this one at the time was no longer available. It works, it just takes longer. It just doesn't have the same power that this one does. And this one works a lot easier. I'll link to this one down below, and hopefully it will still be available. When this came back in stock, I bought another one like it. So for $20, you can have something to vacuum seal your goods with. A brake bleeder, it's a brake bleeder kit. It comes as a whole kit, and this is the pump, and it's the pump that you use to vacuum the air out of your jars and seal your jars. Now there's a couple of different things you can use with this. Now I know, at least at the time I'm shooting this video, that yet again the food saver tops are out of stock, and people are having a heck of a time finding them anywhere. Do not pay more than, I would say, more than $30 for the set of two. Don't do it, because they will probably come back in stock. When they're in stock, you can find them directly on foodsaver.com. It's $25 for the set, and then whatever they charge for shipping and tax. So I'd say it might come to around $30. And I don't know what their shipping is. I originally bought these on Amazon, and if they're available at foodsaver.com, then they're available at Amazon. Either you can buy them separately or you can buy them as a set. But again, at the time I'm shooting this, the food saver tops are not available. But whenever you can get your hands on these, I still recommend them, even if you choose to buy or make the chamber yourself. So we do sell these chambers. They sell out pretty quick, but Patrick keeps making them as long as people are still interested. I use the one that we have the fitting on it that goes to the brake bleeder pump. And so I have a video just on this and how to use it. So those are just a few ideas on investments. Look into your different brands. In my personal opinion, yes, there are certain things I find worth the expense and other things I don't. Somebody might be the other way around. They might be the kind that would rather buy an Excalibur and a Vitamix and go less expensive on the grain mill and the canner. It all depends on you and your needs. And again, what you can afford to do right now. But either way, these are all good investments to consider for when it comes to preparing food and putting up food for long term. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful. I know it ended up being a little longer than I meant it to be, but anyway, hope you could glean something from it. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.